So neuroplasticity, for anybody that's not come across it, is actually science's term for the way we learn things, right? The brain adapts and changes structure based on how we're learning, and we are in our most neuroplastic state in heightened senses of emotions, number one being fear. So when we have this huge experience, the brain goes, I'm really neuroplastic because, and again, it's so I need to learn something and script it so it becomes automatic in case that thing happens in the future, and I might need to save your life, and therefore I will recall that pattern. Lots of these patterns are thought-based patterns, and lots of these patterns then we script and we hone.
You're listening to the Sales Today podcast, and I'm your host, Fred Copestake. On this podcast, we explore how sales professionals can develop a modern approach to winning business, the application of virtual selling techniques, how to create meaningful business relationships, and much more. Why not take our free collaborative selling scorecard to see how your sales approach suits today's environment? You'll find a link in the show notes. And welcome to the Sales Today podcast, where I'm delighted to be joined by Jo Britton. Now, Jo is a neurosculpting practitioner, and I believe the only one in the UK. Is that right, Jo?
That's absolutely correct. Yeah.
Wow. And I'm really excited for this conversation because a lot of this is to do with change. And I mean, sales is all about change. Salespeople have got to understand this. So I'm really looking forward to kind of hearing the neurosculpting angle on this.
Okay.
So I don't know. What do I ask you first? Do I ask about change, or I ask what neurosculpting is? What's the best angle? Help my brain work here.
I know, and our brains get overwhelmed all the time, don't they? Why don't we start with, as this is sales today, let's put this into a sales context to begin with, and how this is the kind of thing that we're never really taught in sales school. If we went to sales school, I mean, I started in sales. I never went to sales school. You have a sales school. Everyone needs to join it. So,
of course, more people should go to sales school.
Sales school.
Excellent. Yeah. Podcast finished. There we go. I have the highlight.
I know, but it's true, isn't it? Actually, you can go to university and do degrees and all sorts, like marketing and whatever. But actually, I've not found a degree in. Maybe I'm wrong. But a degree in sales, but there's one. This is super important. Thinking about, I think, two things and the way our brain's organised when it comes to selling. How people make decisions, but change is the big one, right? Because what we're actually asking people to do when we go in and we present our thing that we want them to buy is we're actually asking them to make a change. And what we're asking them to make a change often is in their own behaviour. And here's the problem, Fred. Change for brains is really, really hard to do. And that's because we think about the hierarchy of the brain. The brain's number one job is to keep you safe and alive. So it is looking at all times for anything that is threat so that it can save your life in those moments, right? Nothing about change is what the brain needs. So the brain is also a prediction machine. So by that, I don't mean like it's the crystal ball gazing stuff. It's that the brain is operating and helping you navigate the world based on predictions, scripts, patterns. It's how we learn things, right? It'd be Groundhog Day otherwise if we didn't have them. So these prediction scripts and patterns help us navigate the world automatically without us having to relearn how to do things. So the obvious ones are, we learn to walk, don't we? We learn to, I don't know, you're a sporting man, aren't you? Is it rugby or your game?
Watching these days.
Watching, but you learn to play rugby, yeah. We learn to pick up, bottle of water. These are all prediction scripts and patterns that help us navigate the world without having to relearn them. When it comes to change, we don't have the prediction script, because we don't know actually what that certainty is going to be if we've not done it before, right? So nothing about change actually is predictable. The brain needs predictability. It looks for the familiar. It wants safety. It wants support. All of those sorts of things, so that I'm safe in the world. I'm okay in the world. When we're selling somebody something, it's all about change. So actually, if you're selling really, really well, you're probably doing change really well. Maybe you don't know you're doing it in a deliberate way. So thinking about how the brain's wired, number one, around change is massively important. But then number two, we're talking about, I sort of mentioned decisions as well. If you think about it in a business context, most of us are trained or learn to make decisions objectively and rationally. And I don't know about you, but in my career, a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past in sales has been a business to business sale. And so you're always looking for that, you think as the purchaser, you're going to make an objective and rational kind of decision. And data and things like that are, they're important. But what we all forget, or what we don't all realise, is we're human beings and we have emotions, and our emotions make the decisions, because we're human beings with social brains. We can come on to that, I think, on how, I think from a sales point of view, understanding how your brain's wired. And I've got like a model, because yes, I'm a neurosculptor. I also work in a field called neuro leadership, which is the application of neuroscience to leadership. And it means that I work with people and organisations to improve their performance. That means personally and at a business level. So it means that in my field, I work with, from top floor to shop floor and across multiple teams. Sales teams are one of the teams I work with, because everybody wants to sell more and businesses want people to sell more.
There's another whole discussion about salespeople being leaders anyway, because they have to lead customers, and they're not kind of up the garden path type, but kind of guide them and use leadership skills. But hey, we'll save that one for another day. But it's all related, isn't it?
It's all very related, and you make a really good point there. Actually, we're all leading ourselves first every day.
Right?
Yeah. So people will think, oh, I'm not a leader. I've not got the job title, but actually we're all leaders. So whether we're leading, like you say, in that context of the sales role, but we're leading ourselves in community and business. We're leading at home, we're leading families. And so leadership for me, so again, this is the brain connection here. If you're ever asked to define leadership, you'll get 100 different sorts of answers. But leadership for me actually is that sense of internal navigation and expression of that into the outside world. So again, that's all about how your brain's working for or against you, and how it's impacting your nervous system, and therefore how you show up in the world and what results you get because of the behaviour. That will fit into when we talk about neurosculpting later.
Wow, so much. I'm scribbling away here. There's so many things in there. So brain wired, okay, making decisions, yes, rationally. Let's put things on a spreadsheet. Let's do it all kind of the ROI and calculate all that. But we're human beings. We're emotional. Yeah,
emotional, and we have a social brain. There's a brilliant model by Dr. David Rock that can help you. So if there's one thing I would suggest now in this modern age, and I think this really fits well with what you do, because you talk a lot and you train people in collaborative selling, don't you? This is the new kind of era that we're in now, isn't it, when it comes to selling? And it fits perfectly well with your approach to this too. And I think this is probably what you're teaching automatically, but there's some brain science around it. So Dr. David Rock has a model, and it's called SCARF. So it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. Now, this is all about our social brain as human beings, and how our brain is organised around a principle of threat and reward. So how do we? So I also use this when I teach this and facilitate this with leaders, with teams, when it comes to change. This is a really good, easy and simple model. If there's one thing to learn in this day and age, it's this and how to apply it. So how do we touch on these elements of SCARF? So I use SCARF also as a verb, right?
Yeah, I've heard you use it as a verb.
As a verb,
Scarfing someone, what?
So we're having scarfy conversations, we're scarfing someone, we scarf ourselves. That
an adjective as well, everything.
Yeah, it's brilliant. And when people learn how to do this, it's super simple. When people learn how to do it and apply it in context, conversations change massively. Everybody has a common language, a common tool set, and you see results really, really quickly because they're actually really, really simple. And there's probably loads of things people will say, well, that's familiar in psychology, or that's familiar, but this just wraps it up nicely, I think, in a really good way. So how do we touch on this? So basically, what this model talks about is a sense of, we need a sense of status, a sense of certainty, a sense of autonomy, relatedness and fairness to feel good as a human being. You know, that everything in my world is safe. My life isn't under threat, right? When we threaten any of those 5 brain domains, if you like, then you know what I'm like, I have my characters, then that is like to the brain, my life is under threat. So again, remembering that first principle, the brain's job is to keep you alive and safe. If I perceive any of those 5 things, status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, or fairness, are threatened, then my brain is going to go into life-saving gift mode, right? Life-saving gift mode is there's a car hurtling towards me and I need to mobilize and get out of the way. Boom, right? Which sends on neurochemistry into action. So our adrenaline is kind of like, get ready. And then our cortisol, the stress hormone, it's like our mobilization juice. Go, fight, flee, or it's technically a different part of the brain, but sometimes you have that freeze kind of like response as well, don't you? And we will have all have had as salespeople those experiences with prospects, won't we? That it's like you might have called it objections, you know, the kind of resistance to all these objections, or the ghosting. You've had that with proposals, haven't you?
Yep,
you know,
yep,
so
yep,
that's like the kind of freeze response or whatever. So, or the flee, you know, the ghosting. I'll just run away. I'm not going to contact you again, right? So the reality is there may have been something about those sales conversations or the approach that we've taken that has threatened your prospect's sense of status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, or fairness. So when that happens and their chemistry and your chemistry is mobilized, it's acting inappropriately for them and for you, which I call your Frankenstein effect or your Frankenstein brain. So this is all happening at lightning speed. So
if you're laughing and you can hear me giggling, Jo's holding up a little Frankenstein model.
Yeah, so I don't know whether this goes on YouTube or whatever.
It'll be on YouTube as well. Go and have a look on YouTube. She's genuinely got a Frankenstein.
My Frankenstein little character, right? I say that he lives in your midbrain. So if you do it, I was going to say you do this now with me, Fred, but you've got earphones on, is you put your fingers kind of right here above your ears. If they meet in the middle, if they were to meet in the middle, that's your midbrain. It's ancient brain, right? Ancient brain that hasn't evolved really, but does life-saving stuff that you need it to do automatically. Because if that car's coming towards you, you don't need to think, oh, stop. Do I go left? Do I go right? What should, and make those, what you would say are rational decisions. So coming back to the start of the conversation, in business, we assume we're going to make rational, logical decisions. That bit happens in a different part of your brain. That bit happens here at the front of your brain, which is your prefrontal cortex, yeah? Or people call it I'm pointing there. People call it the chief executive of the brain. I call it Einstein genius. So I am now, for the benefit of those listening rather than watching, I am now holding up my Einstein character.
Well, let me describe it. It's a bobblehead.
A bobblehead, yeah. Okay.
Einstein's head's bobbly.
Bobblehead. So rational, logic, but all the other things actually, like motivation, goal setting, achievement, again, these are part of you as a salesperson. You want to be able to achieve your sales targets and goals. All your best human qualities, like I have empathy, I'm able to regulate emotions well, I am able to develop rapport with you, are kind of a product of front of brain, prefrontal cortex. So,
in other words, sorry to interrupt you, am I fair to put the kind of the EQ label on that? So the EQ stuff that we know is emotional intelligence is your Einstein stuff.
Absolutely. That is the capacity there, because it's like a seesaw effect, right? Frankenstein is brilliant as a life-saving gift. It's the fast automatic stuff, but it's wholly inappropriate. So ways in which this shows up. You as the salesperson, what are the behaviours that might happen? Irritation, frustration, fear, lack of belief in things, which means that you react emotionally in less positive ways. He's inappropriate for this, for most of what we're doing. Most of what we're doing every day is not a threat to life, in our jobs, in our conversations, but here's where scar happens. When I call it a verb, we scar ourselves and each other through thoughts, thinking, belief, behaviours, that kind of thing, right? And then we scar other people. Meaning, with some of those things, we're either feeling a threat to our own status, or we've threatened our prospect status, certainty, autonomy, all of those things, the SCAR model. If we want to sell better, how does this relate? If we want to sell better, if we want to be a better salesperson, then we need to understand, how do we minimise a sense of threat, and how do we maximise the sense of reward? And we can do that using the SCAR model. So how does that relate in sales? Well, if you think about it, this is where I think it really fits with like what you talk about as collaborative selling. Status, right? If we can help our prospect feel like their status has been elevated in a conversation, then they're going to feel really good. They're going to be in Einstein genius like mode. How do we do that? It's basic stuff that we will have taught people on training programs, listening, asking questions, asking for their opinions, ideas. When you do that, you give people a sense of status. I'm important. I feel important. But how many times still do we see, we know it because we see it because we work with people, is that, here's my product. I'm going to, especially engineering, manufacturing, we both work in those sectors. Here's my product. You want it because it does all these technical things. And maybe, I think we had a pre-conversation on this, Fred, didn't we? Maybe it's like, you're a technical salesperson. Maybe you've come up from engineering, you've gone into sales, you love all the shiny bits and things on your product. You go and talk to another technical salesperson and you go, oh, yeah, it's great, it does all these things. But actually, what you're actually getting that person to do, linking it back to change, is they're going to have to make a change, make a decision to make a change. Now, that's hard.
It's interesting, actually. It just made me think. I did a podcast with a mate of mine who's an IT director, and he's seen this. Well, he's put a label for this, which is why it's so sad. He calls it the condescending pitch. It's where people turn up and they're like, well, have you heard about this sort of stuff then? I mean, obviously there's lots of developments in that. So they're basically trying to belittle him and think this is like a clever, well, hey, let me tell you about all these wonderful things. It's like, it's not going to get a good reaction from someone, is it?
Right.
Literally, let me just chop your status away. Right, no,
end of conversation. Example of that. Yeah, they do. Or they'll say, here are all the things that you're doing wrong. You see this on social media a lot, don't you? Here are all the things that you're doing wrong. Well, actually, when you threaten somebody's status, what you're actually threatening is them as a human being, an individual, their identity. It's going to get you nowhere. So you can use this proactively. How do I build a sense of elevated status in somebody? I mean, it's exactly the same. Think of a different context of this. You're in work. So I do a lot of work with change in organizations. We're going to restructure. We're going to do whatever. And suddenly, and you know, people attach a lot of status and sense of their identity to things like their job title, the desk they sit at, the car they drive. And suddenly we're going to change all that and change your title and terms and conditions. And of course, people are going to react in Frankenstein mode. Now, I'm not saying you're not going to make those decisions and do those things. It's business, you have to do them. But it's the way that you approach that means you can affect change with less kicking off and less Frankenstein moments. You don't eliminate it completely, but it actually helps you make progress more quickly and get better results with people.
Awesome. I mean, this is probably a whole area that we need to look at. I mean, salespeople are trained to find pain, aren't they? And yeah, look, I understand this and I train it, and it's, but be careful in the amount of pain that you're inflicting on someone. You know, we're trying to get enough that they realize that there is something they need to do. But if you keep hammering away at the pain like a demented woodpecker, tap, 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 at some stage, I think this is going to backfire. And
yeah,
so
I
we
mean,
need
I
to be
think
really sensitive to this stuff and what it's actually doing.
I think you have, it's the approach with it.
Yeah.
So absolutely. And again, it's about how the brain's organized around threat and reward, and motivation, and whether you are towards based motivated or away from motivated. So for some people, that's really what motivation really is. It's a neurological process that happens at the beginning. You wake up in the morning where your brain decides it's going to move away from threat and towards reward. But like, as simple as that, that's what motivation is. And we're all motivated. It's just our wiring can be different. I'll give you a personal example. I've been talking about it actually today. I always thought, so the pain thing can be really helpful. Well, for two reasons. Of course, we want to work out, you know, we can solve somebody's problem and help them avoid the pain they keep having with that problem. That's really what we're doing in sales, isn't it? We're helping people solve their problems, right? The approach you take, though, you need to be a bit bit savvier and smarter about, because for some of you, and again, it links to status. If you think about that, and the brain being lazy and behaviour being very difficult to change, for some people, that they may be avoidance-based motivated. But some people, they may be towards-based, reward-based motivated, meaning, like, for me, I always thought, I've had a personal here, but struggled with my weight over the years, yo-yo diet, you know, there's the pain. The pain is, so you see it on social media all the time, yo-yo dieters, However, actually, what I've discovered is, so every time I set a goal around weight loss, and I thought with that I was towards-based motivated, i.e., I'm going to look and feel great in my clothes, right? And then I would fall off the wagon, repeatedly at the last 3 weeks, 6 weeks, and then I'd beat myself up, and then it makes it harder next time because I've got evidence that I failed, in inverted commas, like before. However, what I have discovered is, for that particular thing, I'm actually avoidance-based motivated. So my goal's been set very differently. So this time the goal has been about my health, because actually I had a health scare 12 weeks ago. So the goal is actually, I just want to maintain good blood pressure, good cholesterol levels. And so in order to do that, I need to do X, Y, and Z. As a byproduct, I've lost 20 pounds of weight in 12 weeks, and I've consistently been going to the gym, which I've never done for that long before. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to be able to do this forever, because it's still a learning process, but it's the longest I've been able to do it. So when we talk about, and we've been trained for like pain, we also need to think about people's wiring. So the way that you ask questions is really important to kind of understand that person and their wiring, and are they avoidance or towards based motivated. And most of the time, I think, either like with salespeople, It's this amazing thing's going to happen if you buy this product. It's going to do this. It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to make, whatever. That's towards based, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whereas in reality, that person, because you're selling, it's the old adage, isn't it? People buy from people. You might be thinking that's the pain that they have, that they want to solve, when actually they're driven very differently from their motivation. And it gets really complicated in an organizational B2B relationship, because you will very often have many different people as part of that decision-making unit that you need to influence and engage with, and not scar.
Decision-making units are getting bigger and bigger. I mean, the research has shown that, they're going up. There's more people. And if you're listening and yours aren't, then I'd suggest they probably are. It's just that you've not understood all the more people involved. But
and so if you think about each of those interactions, the people that are involved in the buying process or decisions, each of those are human beings. Every way in which we need to know these people. Yeah. We need to know these people, how they're wired, and how we can use something like SCAR in our favour. It's going to be different with different people.
I feel like there might be 5 episodes. There's one around status, there's one around certainty, there's one around autonomy, there's one around relationship, there's one around fairness. But is this at the core? So let's just think about neurosculpting then, because I'm fascinated in that. I think you're kind of touching on it. I'd not come across that term before. I come across neurolinguistic programming before, and I don't know if you're allowed to say them both in the same sentence, or whether they're friends or they're not. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
It's like the Lilliputians and the whatever. Oh no, we are exact way. No. But tell me a little bit more about neurosculpting then, and how this comes into helping us do all this.
Okay, so we've looked at a model around, threat and reward and social brain. But I also said right at the beginning that human beings work on prediction scripts and patterns, right? Yes. So neurosculpting, it's a trademarked process. Think rewiring, repatterning, rescripting brains to optimize performance. So some of the prediction scripts and patterns, they're based on everything we've ever heard, learned, seen, experienced in our life. So while we share all this amazing biology, and functional stuff that brains do, our patterns are scripted differently as each individual, because everybody's life's been different. So some of those patterns are extremely empowering patterns, and maybe we've scripted those by accident. We tend to script things, or we script on the basis of neuroplasticity in the brain. So neuroplasticity, for anybody that's not come across it, is actually science's term for the way we learn things, right? The brain adapts and changes structure based on how we're learning, and we are in our most neuroplastic state in heightened senses of emotions, number one being fear. So when we have this huge experience, the brain goes, I'm really neuroplastic because, and I mean, again, so I need to learn something and script it so it becomes automatic in case that thing happens in the future, and I might need to save your life, and therefore I will recall that pattern. Lots of these patterns are thought-based patterns, and lots of these patterns then we script and we hone. It's all based on, for the benefit of people listening, I am now showing my neuron, which is Norma.
Your desk must look awesome. Norma the neuron.
Yeah, Norma the neuron. Okay, so they're your brain cells. We have them in other parts of the body, but people will be familiar with neurons being your brain cells. And what happens with these is, heightened sense of emotion in our experience, in an environment, and the neurons go, when it's like that, they go, I need to pay attention. So they sit up and they start getting really, really active, and they take in the information in the form of electricity into the dendrites, into the cell body. If it is super juicy, it's too much for the cell body. It exhausts that, comes through the axon. It eventually comes out of your neurotransmitter gates, which are emitting proteins and hormones, like your stress chemicals that we talked about. And then when it's super juicy, there's another neuron next to it. It goes, oh, I need to listen, and they fire and they wire together. So if you've ever come across Hebb's law of neuroplasticity, neurons that wire together fire together. And when they fire together, they're wired together. When they're wired together, they fire together, right? So we hone networks of neurons, patterns, thoughts, beliefs. So for instance, if when I was young, somebody did or said something to me, an authority in my life, and it made me feel really bad or fearful, then it's likely I've scripted something, a fear-based pattern. For many, the common one I talk about in sales is the rejection pattern that we might have scripted. If something's happened in our life and it didn't feel good and we've got this fear of rejection, then if we end up in a sales role, then actually it can prevent us from being our best and selling, because we have this fear of rejection. So what neurosculpting does is help identify unhelpful, disempowering patterns, and we can release or re-script them so that they don't, or disrupt them so they don't have the same emotional charge over you. And we use the same science that scripted them to do that. However, so we create neuroplasticity in the brain, so it's right for learning something new, but not in a heightened state of fear. The second most neuroplastic we are is in a state of curiosity and novelty. So in neurosculpting, we use all of your brain, because we're not half-brained. We use all of your brain to boost neuroplasticity and then change the script. We also use it to create empowering scripts and patterns. So with sales teams, what I'll do is like, your rock star selling pattern, what does that look like? Or we'll create your motivation sales target achievement pattern. Takes 15 or 20 minutes the first time we do it. And it's like, you go to the gym, just start going to the gym. When you go to the gym, the more times you go, you're exercising physical muscles, aren't you? And they get stronger. This is the same, it's the gym for your mind and your brain and your patterns. So the first time we do it, we follow a 5-step process using all your brain. So we calm down the dude, the Frankenstein, we calm that fight flight center down. We create novelty and curiosity in the prefrontal cortex. We engage our Einstein genius. We tell the brain a story. Got my brain here for those that are watching.
More things.
Brought my props. I've got a brain. It's in 2 halves, the 2 hemispheres. Left and right hemisphere process language, information, data differently. So we tell the brain a story that uses left and right hemisphere of the brain. It creates crosstalk across the midline of the brain. So it helps to either release the unhelpful pattern, disrupt it, or create a better one. There's a particular way as a neurosculptor, I guide people through that. And then we anchor it into our nervous system through somatic gestures, which are, a body response to that. So what will happen is, for most clients, pretty much 95% of clients that I work with on this, you feel some activation in the body around that. So you get to anchor it through the body. We usually do body taps or gestures, but you could do things like, inhale scents and things. We might connect, creates that connection. It's a bit like, if you ever, I don't know, like for me, my granny used to bake lovely apple pie. And whenever I smell apple pie, I think of granny. It's that connection, same sort of thing.
Yeah, cigar smoke for me. Makes me feel safe. Cigar smoke makes me feel safe. Reminds me of that with my dad watching the Five Nations at the time. Yeah,
exactly that, right? Yeah. And you've got that sense of safety. And so it's that memorable connection, and then we give it a name. So you give it a name, so it's a linguistic reference. So what that also means is we've created that pattern, or released. So some of the release stuff we do might be a fear-based pattern, a stress-based pattern. It might be beliefs that don't serve us very well, that we're not aware of. The stuff that we script, like I said, it could be empowering beliefs, confidence, whatever those things are that are going to help us achieve what we want to achieve. 15 to 20 minutes, but then it's an audio as well, so you listen to it. So if you listen to the 15 and 20 minute one, the more you do it, the more you strengthen in that neural pattern. But actually, the whole somatic thing, you can do it into 2 to 3 seconds a day. whenever you do that body gesture and you say the name of that experience we did, it strengthens the neural pattern.
Wow.
The results.
Sorry, carry on. Yeah, carry on.
I'm going to say it's like being on steroids with results for things, because it's actually doing all the things that we actually need to make us, I'm going to say in inverted commas, successful, and to optimize our performance. When we understand the stuff that holds us back and we make the choice to work on that, to release it and to script it, and when we are looking and we understand what are the things that are going to improve our performance, and we script those, it's then on steroids. It happens really quickly, especially with some of the other stuff that I do in capacity of neuro leadership coach and performance coach. So we see, in some companies, literally within 2 or 3 sessions, millions of pounds worth of new business being unlocked, just because people get in the way brains work. When you put those things together, SCAR, Neurosculpting, the shifts are really significant.
Oh, this is awesome stuff. And when I kind of interrupted you there, I was going to say, it just must be so powerful, this. I mean, I have a fascination with the brain and kind of some of the knowing what it can do, and finding this as a way to really manage it. Well, no, not manage it. No, you're saying change it, actually. Sculpt it to what will be more resourceful for you. It's awesome stuff.
But it is also managing it as well. You're right.
Yeah.
It is, because if you think about the SCAR thing again, that for you as an individual, whether you're in sales, leadership capacity, whatever, parent, husband, wife, whatever, if you understand what scarfs you, then you can put the things in place, right, that are going to help you, like, regulate emotions. What we think, what we believe influences the decisions we make or we don't make. They influence, our behavior, the actions, and therefore the outcome and the result. And often it's always that thing about, what's the outcome I want here? What's my intention here? And I think whatever profession you're in, and when you think about in sales, we're very target driven. What's my outcome that I want here? It's to hit my sales because that's the job, right? Or either the towards base, I'm going to get my bonus, or the avoidance bit is I'm going to get the sack. So we focus so much on what's my outcome here. In a sales capacity, we need to start thinking a bit more about, okay, what's a good outcome for the prospect here, and how do I navigate that path with them collaboratively? Yeah. To get, so it's win-win. Now, it sounds cliche, but it is, so that it's win-win.
It has to be. Their success is my success. Customer success is your success. So, this is awesome. I could chat about this forever.
We haven't got time.
But look, I mean, I know you share tons of stuff on this. I mean, you're a real champion for it and want to promote it and want to help as many people as possible. So where can people get in touch with you? What's the best?
I mostly hang around on LinkedIn. So
Jo Britton.
Yeah, I do. I'm on there all the time. So I mostly hang around on LinkedIn. So you can look me up there. I've got tons of resources. But I think also it's probably worth, your listeners will probably be connected with you if they want to find out more about how they can improve in a sales context. Performance, the numbers, the bottom line happens as a result of understanding people and brains. How easy, how much would life be so much simpler? The numbers take care of themselves when you understand that. So I'd suggest they reach out to you as well, Fred, because I know there's some awesome stuff that, the things that we both do together that can help organizations do that. Particularly, I think, my field, and I know a lot of your background has been in engineering, manufacturing, mine's also been in construction. So some of those sort of in industries too.
My Einstein's doing somersaults at the moment in my brain. I'm thinking, right, how can I bring more of this stuff into kind of what I'm sharing? So brilliant. I'll put your LinkedIn link into the show notes so people can connect on that. I mentioned that heard you talking on this, but look, Jo, brilliant. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing, and just a tiny part really of all the stuff you're doing, but hopefully enough to really just get people's the right part of the brain working for them. That's what I want.
I hope so. Well, thanks so much for the opportunity. It's been amazing to talk to you, Fred.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening to the Sales Today podcast with me, your host, Fred Copestake. I hope you've enjoyed what you heard today. If you did, please get in touch and hit subscribe. And remember, you can take the Collaborative Selling Scorecard for free to check out how your sales approach works in today's environment. You'll find it in the show notes.